Industry voice: the East African crude oil pipeline is almost built. The most damaging work is happening now. Nearly 2 decades ago, commercial oil reserves were confirmed in Uganda's Albertine Graben. Since then, the East African crude oil pipeline has been debated, delayed, and fiercely contested. Construction began in earnest in 2022. As of this spring, the pipeline stands at 80% complete, with commissioning targeted for July and first oil exports expected by October. That timeline means the decisions being made right now at specific riverbanks and wetland edges across Uganda and Tanzania will shape the ecological and social health of this region for the foreseeable future. The Netherlands Commission for Environmental Assessment's independent review of the ACOP identified wetland and river crossings as the pipeline's most ecologically critical construction phase. Once they are complete, the damage to interconnected river basins, wetlands, and Ramsar sites will be effectively irreversible. New spatial analysis shows that the EHOP and its feeder pipelines intersect with 158 wetlands in Uganda alone, overlap with 44 protected areas, and cut through 7 key biodiversity areas. 84% of the pipeline network intersects with antelope habitat, 67% with monkey habitat, and 22% with leopard habitat. This is the geography through which hot crude oil will flow under pressure for the next quarter century, having a climate impact equal to nearly 380 million tons of carbon dioxide. 2 river crossings deserve particular attention in this final construction window. The Victoria Nile crossing sits within Murchison Falls National Park, Uganda's oldest and largest protected area and its last remaining lion stronghold. The Tilenga Environmental and Social Impact Report classified this crossing as a high adverse impact site and warned of flooding risks during all phases of the project. Plans to use horizontal directional drilling at this location pose well-documented risks to wetland systems. An independent advisory review of the ACOP found that the crossing of wetlands remains one of the most critical activities in the construction of the pipeline. The noise from drilling and barge movements alone could mean 25 to 30 more years of wildlife disturbance in a park where elephants are already fleeing in response to the existing construction activity. The Kibale-Bukura River crossing in southern Uganda represents another critical point of concern. Satellite imagery from April 26 confirms that pipeline construction has reached the riverbanks, but the river crossing itself has not yet been completed. The Kibale-Bukura River flows into the Samuka Ramsar site and ultimately into Lake Victoria, which sustains more than 40 million people across the region. Spatial analysis, drawing on IUCN Red List data, shows the crossing area overlaps with habitat for 1 critically endangered species, 3 endangered species, and 2 vulnerable species, including the white-bellied pangolin, giant ground pangolin, African wild dog, and black rhinoceros. The financial picture offers no reassurance that these ecological risks are offset by reliable returns, making the project's justification increasingly difficult to sustain. According to BankTrack, project costs had already climbed to $5.8 billion by December 2024, up from an original estimate of $3.5 billion, a 66% increase. Most major international banks and the 4 largest reinsurance companies in the world have withdrawn from the project. An Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis report found that China's rapid electric vehicle adoption is expected to suppress global oil demand, and that the value of Uganda's oil could fall 34% for investors and 54% for the country under foreseeable demand scenarios. The pipeline's heating systems, required to keep the waxy crude from solidifying at 80 degrees Celsius, have not been adequately addressed in impact assessments in terms of failure risk. Beyond escalating construction costs, the project also threatens ecosystems and local economies that already generate substantial long-term value. The pipeline corridor intersects fisheries in Lake Albert worth approximately $100 million annually, the Samuka Ramsar site with at least $117 million in ecosystem services annually, tourism revenues associated with Murchison Falls National Park, estimated at roughly $2 million annually, and Tanzanian mangroves estimated at $2.1 billion annually in total economic value. In this sense, the project is not only a high-risk infrastructure investment, It also risks undermining ecological systems that already sustain significant economic and social value. Meanwhile, communities along the pipeline route are already experiencing what was supposed to be avoided. 8 of 10 affected districts have reported destructive flooding, water and noise pollution, unauthorized dumping of excavated soils on community land, and the loss of subsistence gardens critical to people's livelihoods and local water sources since construction began. More than 100,000 people across Uganda and Tanzania face permanent land loss linked to EACOP and associated developments. An independent report found that displaced people were inadequately rehoused or compensated. Research on pipeline impacts in wetlands elsewhere in the world is consistent. Damage persists for years, sometimes decades, even when construction follows best management practices. One study found a measurable impact 8 years after pipeline construction. Another documented that erosion and sedimentation from pipeline and access road construction create lasting water pollution even when guidelines are followed. For every barrel of oil produced, 3 barrels of wastewater are generated, a ratio that can triple as oil fields age. The window to prevent the most consequential damage is now. The river crossings that remain incomplete represent the last practical point at which independent oversight, halted construction, and genuine accountability could prevent harm that, by the project's own assessments, cannot be undone. Juan Pablo Osornio is the Engagement and Policy Director for Earth Insight. He has worked with governments in the US, Europe, Latin America, and Asia on climate policy and was responsible for creating the Global Climate Political Strategy for Greenpeace from 2017-2022. Juan Pablo is passionate about international cooperation and committed to bringing countries together to protect the global commons. He is originally from Mexico City, holds a BA in International Relations from Instituto Tecnológico Autónomos de Mexico, and an MPA on Environmental Science and Policy from Columbia University, SIPA.